Finance Commission on Norwood Community Media. Our virtual meeting today is live and will be recorded, and you will have access to it on your cable. This is an open meeting, and those who wish to access the virtual meeting can do so through the posting of this meeting on the town's website. I will proceed with a roll call vote of attendance. Let's see. Bob Donnelly.
Here.
Judy Langone.
Here.
Kelly Newmy.
Here.
Tom McQuaid.
Here.
Alan Slater.
Here.
Molly Ahern.
Here.
Emily Chambers.
Here.
Tony Mizuko.
Here.
I got everyone. Do we have any visitors who wish to announce themselves?
I'm here, Karen Sheridan.
Okay, Karen.
Kathy.
I'm missing. I couldn't hear that.
Kathy Carney.
Thank you, Kathy.
This is Matt Lane.
Thank you, Matt. Okay, I have everybody, I think. Thank you. First thing on our agenda is the acceptance of the minutes from May 18th. Can I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
I'll second.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Judy?
Aye.
Bob?
Yes.
I'm in favor. Okay, and Alan has voted aye. Okay, thank you. All right. So, when we were last here, last week, we had some discussions and that ended in a rescission of our vote of the week before. So at this point, we don't have a vote on the budget so that we can go forward. At the last meeting, you asked that I would meet with, or we decided that I would meet along with Alan Slater, Tony Mizuko, and with feedback from Dr. Thompson, that we would go and discuss some thoughts and ideas that we had for revising the budget or revising how we are going to sort of present the budget, whether we were going to, how we were going to do our votes and that sort of thing. So we did meet, and you all had an opportunity, I hope today, to read what Tony had put together for us. Tony, do you want to go over this for the audience?
Sure thing. Tom, if you want to bring it up.
What Tony is presenting or going to present now is what we agreed upon in when we discussed the budget with the group that was sort of a little subset of our regular meeting.
Ann?
Yes.
Ann?
Yes.
So this is a document that came out of in draft form right now for a meeting that you and Alan Slater, you in particular, I guess, requested it in order to work together and come up with a consensus, and it was a subcommittee meeting. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
Right. So I'll take everyone through, and we can follow along in the document here, just what we're doing to look at potential revenue changes as a result of anticipated impacts from COVID-19. So the first thing we'll talk about is capital deferment. And we had already made this decision, but just so everyone is aware, and again, we prepared this document with town meeting in mind. We did move $2.6 million in free cash spending on capital items to A, be both borrowing, and B, be in the fall. So this does two things. A $2.6 million expenditure has been moved off to the fall. And we'll be taking a look at the capital plan with the exception of a couple of critical items in the fall as opposed to doing that right now. So that's the first sort of $2.5 million worth of deferment moving off to the fall that we've taken. Tom, if you want to scroll down a little bit. Originally in FY21, total departmental receipts were projected to be $15.3 million. Not all of these receipts are subject to fluctuation. Some of them are a relatively small number, but the ones that are mainly subject to fluctuation are motor vehicle excise, meals and rooms excise, licenses and permits, which is primarily building permits. So those numbers in and of themselves, 4.2 million for vehicle excise, 1.8 for meals and rooms, licenses and permits, 1.9. We're proposing to reduce the projected revenue from departmental receipts to 85% of the prior year's total, which is a reduction of approximately $750,000. We were already going into fiscal 21 very conservatively with 91% of the prior year's numbers. These numbers as they are in relatively good shape, but this will give us a further buffer, if you will, for a total departmental receipt projection of 14.5 million. Now, total state aid is projected at 15.15 million. We can reasonably anticipate the Commonwealth will attempt to reduce state aid. We are working with partners and other organizations and, of course, residents to make sure we're launching a campaign letting the state know that any cuts to local aid will be damaging to our COVID recovery efforts. And I don't just mean the direct public health impact, but how quickly we can get the economy up and running and get people back to work will be hampered by any reductions to state aid. That being said, to be prepared for what I'm terming a dastardly tactic on behalf of the Commonwealth, we would reduce the projected state aid or be able to absorb a projected state aid project to 90% of the current year's receipt. That will be by reducing it by about $1.9 million. Now, I want to make sure everyone knows that state aid comprises two figures, Chapter 70, which is school aid, and UGGA, which is unrestricted general government aid. The UGGA number in prior recessions and recessionary environments has been reduced. The Chapter 70 number has never been reduced, at least in its modern iteration. So some changes of those revenue changes adds up to $2.7 million in lower projected revenues that we would be able to incorporate in the budget. Now, in terms of the expense budget, the scenario change for FY21, at this point in time, we're not expense budget changes. The reason being that everything we do will cost more money next year as a result of COVID-19. And while we do have CARES Act money available to cover some of sort of the immediate costs, everything we do is going to cost more money next year to operate. And the school department in particular, after losing 4 months of traditional delivery, will already be sort of at a disadvantage as they go in. So how would we make up to $2.7 million in potential revenue losses? There's 4 items that we've identified. We would pause our additional retirement catch-up. As everyone knows, this was a $500,000 retirement catch-up that we were proposing to make. Here, if I can, Sandy, if you're listening, if you can mute everyone's mics except the person speaking who's mine, that would be appreciated, just so we can use a little bit of the feedback. Sorry, as I was saying, so we were going to contribute an additional $500,000 into the retirement fund above and beyond our statutory required amount. We would pause that additional requirement contribution. We were going to be placing $428,000 into the stabilization account. We would pause that contribution into the stabilization account. We're going to be placing $700,000 into the override stabilization account, which is actually double what our original projection for the override would be in terms of what we would be depositing into that account. We would pause that contribution, and then we would use approximately $1.1 million in free cash as a further buffer to get us to that $2.7 million number. One of the questions we received is, would we do this now and amend the budget book or do this in the fall? The proposal is this is what we would do in the fall, because if it doesn't need to be done, there's nothing to undo. If we make the changes now, then we would have a complicated warrant in the fall trying to reconvene this. But we can easily, when we hit a fall town meeting, likely late September, we're at $2.7 million right off the starting point. Now, a couple other things on operating budget deferrals in addition to that $2.7 million. What we would be able to do is, Tom will bring it up. So the Student Opportunities Act money, and for anyone who may not be aware, that's additional funding the state has provided through the Chapter 70 formula. It is tied towards specific educational goals and specific programmatic goals. The school department would hold off on the spending of that until we receive confirmation from the state on whether or not we're actually receiving it. The reason being, both from a practical standpoint, we want to know we have the money. The reason we couldn't just simply remove it from the budget now is you want to have that appropriation because we may know by July if that money's there, and then the school department has to put those programs into play if the funding is available. It also will impact exactly how the school department will deliver some of those services. So this is sort of our cautious, the school department saying, well, we know if we didn't receive money to do those specific programs, we wouldn't do those specific programs. We'd also postpone part of our road work schedule, which is approximately $400,000 until we know where we are in the fall. So that work would just get done next spring. It would get added on to additional work that would be getting done. So still completed within the fiscal year, but it gives us a chance to hold back and make sure that we have additional resources in the event of a worst case scenario. Working with Dr. Thompson, we've also identified about $150,000 between the school department and general government that we could hold spending on. That's really sort of decision in time spending that we couldn't put our finger on it today. The reason being where you hit in the year and how the year has started would make a decision based on what spending we would hold off on. We'll have to see some of the regulations as they come out, in particular on the school side, but how we're operating in the fall to say, okay, we think we're going to have a reduced electric load here, or we're going to have a reduced cost here, or we didn't open up this particular facility, so this cost is here. But we reasonably think there's additional funding there that we could be able to hold on to. So between those three items, that's an additional $1 million in cushion in the event of a worst case scenario. I don't think it'll be a worst case scenario, but we have an additional $1 million on top of the $2.7 million of our of additional cushion if we needed to. The next item I want to talk about for a minute is a hiring slowdown, or what I like to call a hiring frost. Some people like to say, and again, the private sector equivalent is we'll just have a hiring freeze. That doesn't always work with the way we're structured with certain statutory requirements for various positions. The easiest example I think to use is a high school or an elementary school principal. A principal resigns and takes another job. We know we need to hire another principal. So you may have other options elsewhere. We do, both on the school side and the town side, every position as it comes up gets reviewed. It doesn't automatically get filled. There's a discussion about, do we need this position? Can we upgrade the position? Do we downgrade the position? Can we transfer it somewhere? What can we do with it? For a majority of our positions, it's a fairly quick discussion because, again, if you have a high school English teacher and that high school English teacher leaves, and you don't really have that many teachers leaving in the middle of the year per se, but if they leave, well, you've got to have somebody to fill that position. Staffing in our larger departments, public safety, public works, you can always have that discussion. But your town clerk retires, well, you're going to need to have a town clerk. You may fill that position and look at what position you backfilled from there. That being said, we're going to continue to evaluate every position as they become open and determine on a case-by-case basis whether it can be held off on or even if a position needs to be filled. Some of those as well are seasonal. Depends on where you are in the year. You may be able to say, you know what, I can keep 2 positions open. I don't need to fill it for 4 or 5 months. But a DPW road position coming up in the winter, we really need that position. A cemetery position going up into Memorial Day, we really need it. If it's September, you might be able to say, we could hold off for 6 months here or there. Same thing with some of the teaching positions, depending on where the year is. You may have lost enough of the year that you lose the position and you need to, you're just backfilling with a substitute that you already have budgeted. So you see some savings there and maybe you're moving things around in the fall, but we would continue that practice as well. The proposed revenue changes would leave us with about $2.4 million. We have to talk about the Forbes Hill number at some point in free cash. That excludes any additions from the end of this current fiscal year. We'd also have $1.2 million in override stabilization and $5.5 million in general stabilization. So in summary, some of these prudent changes to revenue projections, which will be very conservative revenue projections. No town has ever actually projected 90% of the prior year or current year's state aid. I would love to go into every year with very, very conservative numbers like that. And we're projecting 85% of our prior year's receipts for state aid, for departmental receipts. So those are very, very conservative numbers going in. So to summarize the proposal, and I'll read this from my sheet here. We would be reducing in the fall projected revenues by approximately $2.7 million. We would pause the retirement catch-up for $500,000. We would pause the contribution to stabilization for $128,000. Pause the contribution to override stabilization at $700,000. Utilize $1 million in free cash to reduce revenue projections. We would pause on the non-override roadwork money and the Student Opportunities Act money until it's not funny money. Funding until we know whether or not the Student Opportunities Act would be funded. We've put in there language that would go in the motion for the two stabilization expenditures, the retirement catch-up and the non-road work that would be delayed until at least December 1, 2020. That'll give us time to have our fall town meeting, see where state aid is, see where revenue projections are. And if all things are good, we go forward as we intended. If they are not, here's where we can relatively easily free up $2.7 million in revenue. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Tony. Okay, I was going to ask questions. Kelly, is that you?
It sure is. First of all, I'm sorry I cut out. My internet cut out, and I'm on a hotspot right now. So let me know if you can't hear me. I might have to turn my video off. So just let me know. So this is great. I saw this. I think this is exactly what we were asking for in terms of analysis. Just for confirmation, in the initial budget before COVID, we were going to spend $2.6 million in cash on capital items. In this budget, we're actually only spending 1.1 million to cover the budget shortfalls, and the extra 1.5 free cash stays in reserve. Is that correct, Tony?
Correct. That was 2.6 million. We would have cut that check right out of the account that we're not doing. So that's sort of the first deferral, as we've moved $2.6 million out of the capital plan that was going to be cash to borrowing, and we'll take it up in the fall. Then there's $2.7 million in revenue changes on top of that, plus beneath that an additional $1 million that we could free up if we needed to. So we sort of have a layered approach.
Okay, cool. So this actually takes the capital out, which returns, we actually end up with more reserves in case of an emergency next year with this plan than we had previously if we had just bought all the capital.
Correct.
Okay, good. Just making sure. I think this is exactly what we asked for. Thank you, Mr. Mizuko.
Okay. Judy?
Yeah, thank you, Lynn. Tony and everybody who was on this subcommittee after we met last week, I was very uncomfortable, as everybody knows, about moving ahead and not having Plan B. To me, this is a great Plan B. I really think we're right on the nose here. And I think this will work if we don't get Plan A. So I want to thank the subcommittee of Ann, Tony, Alan, and I guess Mayav was there, and Dr. Thompson.
Yeah.
And who else?
I think that's it.
That's it.
Was there.
Oh, Teresa was there too. I think there's a lot of work put into this. It makes me very comfortable. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Judy.
Okay. Alan, you have something you want to say?
Yeah, no, thank you, Wayne. First of all, I'd like to really thank Tony for putting this together. I think this is a great document. I think it reflects the tenor of the meeting. It was a very good meeting. I think we're all on the same wavelength. We're working together. And I think what you've come up with addresses the concerns and the issues that I had. I mean, we really have no idea what the situation is going to be in the fall. And the plan that we came up with certainly gives us flexibility. It gives us some protection, and it allows us to proceed in FY21 without having to cut services, nor does it have us cut any existing personnel. So I think, it's a great plan. I mean, to be honest, I'm still concerned about some of the out years, but again, we have no idea what that situation will be like. We have to be vigilant in what we do and what we spend and how we plan, so that if we have difficulties in those out years, then we'll certainly have the flexibility to provide the services that we will need. One of the things I do want to talk about a little bit, though, is that again, we're not really cutting any positions or services, but I have heard, people say that, well, we really can't cut any positions or services. We have to find ways of funding that, because of the recent override that was passed last spring. To some extent, I disagree with that. I mean, one of the issues is that the override was passed under a certain set of assumptions. And the override was passed under a certain set of assumptions, and if those assumptions didn't come to pass, such as state aid, such as local receipts, the 5-year plan really was blown. then, the whole underpinning of the override vote, simply falls apart. Fortunately, that isn't the issue yet, but I just want to make it clear that simply because we voted for an override doesn't mean that we can't make changes in the budget plan if the assumptions that we made previously turned out not to be correct. So with that, again, I really have to thank Tony. I really have to thank everyone else at the meeting. I think it was a great meeting, and I think it accomplished what I was looking at. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Donald, would you like to say anything?
Sure. Yeah. Again, my compliments to the team and for the plan, and to Tony for actually getting the word dastardly into a budget document. That's very well done.
I did chuckle over that.
Yeah. Snidely Whipple.
I think it does meet the need while preserving the services to town residents. I think that's great. My only question is a technical question. So we have the reduction in revenues, which are logical and hopefully won't come to pass. At the same time, we are preserving the budget projections for the delayed items, the retirement catch-up, the funding of the stabilization plan. From a technical perspective, is our budget technically in balance with these changes?
So it is. It's kind of a funny quirk of how the state certifies your budget. When you go to set your tax rate in the fall, actually prior to that, we submit our Schedule A to the state. They then look at our budget and determine if our projected revenues make sense. So, they don't come down too hard on you, but if we went to go at the point of setting the Schedule A, and this is why we would need to have a town meeting before we did that, where we were projecting $17 million in state aid, but they knew we were only getting $15 million, they don't let you do that. So they don't let you just invent numbers. The same thing with your departmental receipts. If we normally receive $15 million, if you can justify why you're projecting 16, they might say, okay, that makes sense. We understand why you're doing that. We can't just invent a revenue and say, well, we think it's going to be a really good year and the economy is going to boom, so give us 20 million. They're going to say, you've never done 20 million. You're not allowed to project that. So that's why we would, as of June 22nd or June 28th, when we have town meeting, our budget will be balanced that we pass. The final reconciliation of that is actually in September when we submit the Schedule A. So that's when September, October. So that's when the state would say, no, your budget's out of whack. You got to fix it. We are anticipating that it might be out of whack. So prior to submitting the Schedule A, we would know more where our revenues are. This is what we would do at our fall town meeting, which will be likely earlier than normal to make sure our budget is in line. It is kind of a funny process that we pass a budget in June based on numbers, but the state could come back in September, October and say, you're completely out of whack. Usually when you submit your Schedule A, if you have a miscalculation with new growth, it comes out of excess levy capacity. If you're not off too much, they'll let you make a decision and say, well, you can go up on your projected departmental receipts, but if you're off by $1 million or $2 million, at least on our budget size, you got to go back to town meeting and fix that.
Thank you. So the only other question I had, actually, it's not that urgent because I believe it's a school question, but so I believe that the Student Opportunities Act was approximately somewhere north of 500,000. If that funding, if the 300,000 isn't funded, I believe some of the monies that were in that funding actually are for existing school services. I think I'm answering my own question because I believe they may have. I guess my question would be, if Student Opportunities Act isn't funded at all, then they're just going to have to push those position fundings into their main budget because those are existing positions today. So there's no question there. I think they know what they're doing. So I'll withdraw the comment.
Okay.
But thank you.
All right. Kelly?
Thank you, Ed. So I have one question. I think this is all great. Again, I reiterate everyone's feedback. Great work to the team who came up with this. I think this is spot on, exactly what we wanted. Great work to everyone. One thing I'm wondering if we should do, and we don't have to do this maybe now, but I think it might behoove us to do, is that I think we might get into a situation where we end up with slightly more revenue, but not 100% of the revenue that we originally anticipated in the first budget. So would it make sense to rank these things that we have on the screen right here in terms of what would get restored first? So like, would we restore, obviously Student Opportunities Act, that's tied specifically to funding. So if we get that, that goes to that. But would we go to the retirement catch up first and then to the override and then to the road work? Should we rank those things if we get in a situation where we don't fully have all of the revenue back, but get a part of it back or a part more than what we're forecasting right now?
I personally think that we don't need to do it now, that we would do it when we meet before the town meeting that would determine what we were going to do. I also think that we need to think about our policies. The only part of this whole thing that makes me a little nervous is that we aren't necessarily, until December or the fall, we won't necessarily be meeting all of the goals that we had put forward for ourselves. So, but I think we can go follow that guideline of the policy guidelines, and in September or whenever we next meet, we can identify which ones we think are the most important to do. I don't know how anybody else feels.
Yeah, I mean, I think at some point we'll have to have that conversation because it's likely not an all or nothing game.
Yeah.
It's not, the number is probably somewhere between no change and 2.7. So you're right. If we find out it's okay, we've got to adjust. Maybe it's 2 million, but we can use $1 million in CARES Act money. So, okay, it's just $1 million. Maybe we go forward with all of our contributions and use free cash, which we don't want to do in general. But is this really, we think, maybe a one-time thing, or we don't know what's going to happen in the following year? So I think it's worth thinking about and kind of having an idea of, all right, if this comes somewhere in the middle, what's the most stable course going forward?
Yeah.
And I think, what we close out with it. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Alan?
Nothing, Ann.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I guess we need a motion to vote on, yes, Mr. McQuaid? Yes, Mr. McQuaid, your microphone isn't on.
You're muted.
Okay, thank you. I just want to point out that just one of the balances that Tony has in his document may be incorrect. Let me just show you. It had to do with the use of free cash. You may recall that in the budget we have $625,000. I'm just trying to find the document here. So you may recall that this is free cash that certified $3,414,000, and I think Tony forgot that in the budget we are using $625,000 to pay for most of the principal on the Forbes thing. So that's 2.789, and then 2.789 plus that, it was approximately $1.1 million. So it would have about $1.8 million left in free cash.
Okay. Tony, can you make that correction on this document?
We can.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for picking that up, Tom. That was a good catch.
So the budget, and then I would just point out that the budget that you're going to be voting on, and then possibly in the fall reducing, is the same number as that we had on your previous vote.
Correct. We are voting on the budget as was delivered to us in the Finance Commission books. Okay, Alan?
Thank you, Ann. Before we vote on the budget, can I suggest that we take a vote on the proposal prepared by Mr. Mizuko that's in front of us?
Yeah.
Yes.
Be my guest. Make a motion.
And I'd like to make a motion that with the modification that you just suggested, that we approve the revenue budget changes as a result of COVID-19.
I second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Alan?
Aye.
Judy?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Kelly?
Yes.
And I'm a yes also. So unanimous. Thank you. Okay. Now we need a motion on the budget. Judy,
I'll make that motion.
I need a second.
I'll
Second.
second it.
Second,
Okay, I think we got the second from Bob. All in favor?
Aye.
aye,
Alan, Judy,
aye,
Bob,
Yes.
Kelly,
Yes.
and I'm agreeing also. So we have unanimous on that. All righty. Okay, moving on. Thank you, everyone. I really do have to say thank you again because our meeting Friday went smoothly. Everybody was working together and we all knew that we needed to make some changes and identify some areas where we can conserve and help us move forward on a good track. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And an extra thank you for Tony, who actually was creating this document over the weekend. So extra thank you is there. Okay, so we go on to reserve fund transfers.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
This is this year's funding of $125,000. We still have that balance right this moment. I can't see it down any further.
I think we had,
That's correct. We have 125,000. We've had no transfers this year. These collectively today total 44,575, which will leave the balance, if they're all approved, at 80,425.
And then that money would go back as free cash if we do not use that money for any other emergency, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Tony, who's presenting on this? Tom,
I can take it if you like.
whichever.
I'll go in the order that they are listed here. The first one is a police radio repair issue. Obviously, both this and the fire engine are unexpected repairs well above and beyond what the normal operating budget can handle. Walpole recently, our radios are digital. They're not digital capable. You have a problem where different towns upgrade their equipment at different times, and you want to make sure that you can still communicate with your neighbors. And we thought we were in a good place. Unfortunately, Walpole has made a upgrade to their radios, so they are both digital and digital capable. And we now struggle to communicate with Walpole. So we have to make some adjustments to our radios so that we can communicate with them. Obviously, being a sister agency right next door, our level of communication with them for emergency response is absolutely critical. Public safety communication as a whole has gotten better in the last 15 or 20 years, really since in the post 9/11 era. But you still have a situation where some towns have to upgrade their equipment. And as a result, it sort of creates a cascading effect where other towns then have to upgrade so we can all stay communicating. The question I always get is, can't we all just have exactly the same radio at exactly the same time? The problem, again, is everyone upgrades at different times. So there's somebody who likely upgraded 2.5 years ago that their finance commission would say, well, under no circumstances are we going to spend a couple $100,000 on brand new radios when we just did it 3 years ago. So I wish the state one day would come out and just pick a date and time where everyone would have exactly the same equipment and we wouldn't have these issues. That being said, it's a critical repair need. We do have to go ahead and make the adjustment so we can continue to communicate with Walpole PD.
Okay. I have a question for the board. Do you want to hear all about all of these and then vote for them individually after the presentation? Yes,
That's fine, Ann. Whatever's easiest for everybody.
Alan?
I'd just rather do it after the presentation.
Okay. All right. Anybody else? Care one way or the other? All right. After the presentation. Okay. So I'm looking for a motion for $10,656 for the police radio repair.
I'll make a motion to transfer the $10,656 from the account listed, police radio repair, from the reserve account.
Okay.
Second.
Second.
Okay, seconded by Judy. All in favor? Alan,
Aye.
Judy,
Aye.
Aye.
Bob,
Yes.
Kelly,
Yes.
and I'm yes also, unanimous. Okay, next one is Norfolk Agricultural School tuition.
Thank you, Madam.
So, yeah, do you want to take this, Tony, or?
Yeah, it's just a change in the student number at Norfolk Aggie. This is the per student tuition that we pay. There's a reconciliation doesn't happen until their October 1 count. So we project based at the end of the year what we think it's going to be, but sometimes that number changes, and that's just a required tuition cost that we have to have that comes in. It's not an increase in their tuition. It's just one student who wasn't in their end of the year count, and their number is always sort of a guess. They don't know, much like we do, until October who actually shows up.
Can I have a motion for this?
I'll make that motion.
So,
Go ahead.
Okay, Judy made the motion, Bob seconded. Is that what happened here?
I'll second it.
Sounds good.
Okay. All in favor? Alan,
aye.
Judy,
Aye.
Bob,
Yes.
Kelly,
Yes.
and I vote in yes also. Okay, next one, fire equipment repair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This was a substantial repair on engine number 4, which is about a 10-year-old engine. It's scheduled for replacement in about 5 years. The original purchase cost of the engine was around $700,000, and we're looking at probably a $950,000 replacement 5 years from today. I have the chief here to talk to the specifics of what broke in the engine. I am far from an expert, other than large diesel equipment at this cost point. When you do have things happen, again, just think if you went to the auto dealer and you had to have a $2,500 repair, that would be pretty substantial. But this is on a $700,000 piece of equipment. So again, a certainly unbudgeted and unanticipated substantial repair to keep engine 4 up and running. Chief, do you want to speak to the specific of what exactly broke in the engine, as my own level of ignorance over mechanics shows through?
Sure. What it's considered to be is the short block of the engine. Basically, that section of the engine was basically considered dusted, which means that some type of contaminants contaminated that section of it and basically destroyed it. So because of that, we had to rebuild that section of the engine.
All right. Any questions?
A short block is an engine subassembly comprising the portion of the cylinder block below the head gasket but above the oil pan, just in case anyone wanted
Oh,
clarification.
gee, that was great. We needed that to help us in our decision. Okay.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
I'd like to make a motion
thank you.
to $26,344 and to be taken from the reserve fund.
Okay, to the fire department equipment repair.
That's
Okay,
correct.
second that.
Second.
Okay, seconded by Alan. All in favor? Alan,
Aye.
Judy,
Aye.
Bob,
Aye.
Kelly,
Yes.
and I am yes also, unanimous. Okay, thank you very much. All right, would the clerk, the Finance Commission clerk, please sign the appropriate papers for us to perform these transfers? Thank you.
I will do so.
Thank you very much. All right, next on our agenda. Does anyone have any other business that you would like to talk about?
Madam Chair,
Yes,
I'd like to take this opportunity to ask if there is any plans or what maybe the thought process is on the town meeting on June 22nd. It may be too early, I don't know, to be thinking of this, but I know we're having a touchless election on the 8th, of June, Monday, June 8th. And on the 22nd, we're planning to have a town meeting. I was just wondering if there's been any thoughts and social distance and face masks. And I think Walpole is having theirs, outside of a football place? I don't know.
Yeah, Judy, are you referring to a FinCom meeting before town meeting, or how we're doing town meeting in and of itself?
How we're going to do the mechanics of town meeting.
So the plan at this point is to do it in the gym. The reason being that if you segregate out 6 feet of space for 150 plus people in the auditorium, you can't really fit enough people. We'll have the auditorium available as sort of overflow if that happens. Usually it doesn't. We don't get too many folks out to just observe town meeting. Moderator and key officials will be there in person. We're going to be asking department heads that don't need to be there or may just need to be there for their budget are going to join us via GoToMeeting. We're doing it in person. The health department will be on site, assisting with some screenings and ensuring that people are complying with public health requirements. There will be a requirement to wear a mask at town meeting. That's going to be a public health requirement, so that's not a that's sort of not an optional wear a mask. Public health will require you to wear a mask, and we will have nursing staff on site at town meeting. There'll be sanitizer available. There'll be some similar no-touch situation for you to get your badges. We may fill the badges this year and just give everyone a sort of a red card or something like that, or a green card, so that we know that they're a town meeting member when they vote. The doors will be open. The reason we're doing it in the gym is we're able to fit a number of people in there, spacing the chairs out 6 feet apart. We have a mic system where the person with the mic won't need to get close to the person speaking. They'll sort of be running and carrying the mic. People won't need to get up to go to a mic. We discussed the possibility of doing it outside. Some of both the logistics and the potential health impacts of that gave us concern. One of the challenges is outside is not a sustainable method of doing town meeting for us. We know that we need to have fall town meetings, and I'm sure a warm, crisp fall morning by the fire would sound nice, but town meeting in November or February is not going to work outdoors. So we know we have to come up with a way to do town meeting in a manner that maintains social distancing. Whether we use the front field of the high school or the football field, we'd still be weather dependent. So that runs into the issue of we would need to call town meeting, and if it's raining, we would not be able to have town meeting. There's some accessibility issues on either field. The challenge is that just because it's a flat field doesn't actually mean that it's accessible in the same way that a modern building would be for ADA compliance. Stands are ADA compliant. However, the stands can't really be equipped with a tent to cover them. So we have sort of a dual weather issue. We worry about people sitting out in the sun too long, and that can cause potential health issues. We worry if the humidity is too high, and it's not to say that the gym won't necessarily get humid, but if you have a really hot, humid day outside, that could cause some other issues. If the pollen count is very high, people have a breathing issue related to that. The distance from the bathrooms is also a little bit of a challenge. If folks need to use the bathrooms, you're also taking folks further away from the ability to properly wash their hands and use facilities. So out air is safer in the sense of it's a better place for people to gather. But given that we need to hold a meeting and you have all of these other challenges, both health related as well as logistics, the current consensus is that indoors in the gym is the best path moving forward.
Thank you. Kelly?
So has there been a consideration to do it, to allow people to participate virtually that don't feel comfortable being in person? At that point, I don't even know if we'll be into stage 2 of the plan for the state. We don't have dates yet. And so I with 2 small children at home and obviously an elderly parent that lives with me, I know other people are in similar circumstances. I would be a little concerned with going into a room with, 200-300 people in it.
Yeah, the state's looking at a law that would allow digital town meetings. There's no real provision in there for it being sort of a half and half. So we don't know how we would do that to allow certain people to participate digitally. You might be able to do it. The logistic challenge to that is, I think it's tough enough to run a town meeting with 150 people. If you had 150 people on GoToMeeting, moderating that and controlling that becomes, I think, very difficult. Now, we have shortened the warrant down to be the bare minimum. We're going to have a special before the annual. We'll open a special like we normally do. It's going to be, 2 articles. It's going to be internal transfers. And then I think the MWRA loan we do with the special, and that should be it. And then the annual is really just our normal annual, allow the treasurer to send out bill, et cetera, et cetera. And then the budget, which is going to be just a handful of votes to get the budget done. We've kicked the capital off. So the whole process should not take too long. I know everyone likes their 5-night town meetings. This year, if we're going more than a night, we're all failing because the warrant has been pushed off to the fall. So if we're spending 5 nights on, 20% of the warrant, and obviously we've gotten something wrong there. So the goal is that we're going to do it in a safe manner. We'll have PPE available for everyone. Everyone will be socially distanced, and just come in, we do our business and call it a day. It should be sort of a relatively quick in and out. Again, the logistics of trying to do the whole town meeting digitally might end up just causing more problems than it solves.
One more question, follow-up, Tony. What happens if the state doesn't put us into stage 2 at that point, which we're still in gatherings of 10 or less? So what happens at that point?
Legislative bodies are exempt from that ruling. So town meeting, be our legislative body, is allowed to meet at any time in whatever capacity they see fit.
Yeah, Tony, if we do not get a quorum, that would mean we wouldn't have a budget passed. Would then we be forced into a 1/12 budget?
If we had to do that, we would be. All that would do to us is just create a nightmare for the accountants behind the scenes. So Tom and his team and Karen would have a nightmare at that. We'd continue to operate as we always have until we were able to pass a budget. The Senate was looking at an option to reduce quorum, but it was originally limited to open town meetings and not representative town meetings. So we'll follow up on that. A 1/12 budget is not devastating to how we operate. It's just an accounting nightmare to make it all work, because again, it's not less than 1/12 of the prior year's budget. Is what you operate on, and the number can fluctuate. So again, it just from my perspective, there's almost no difference. The poor accountants in the school business office are going to be working 100 hours a week to make that all work, and then to unscrew up the 60,000 journal entries it'll take to make that work.
Well, being a former state employee responsible for creating budgets and looking to get them approved and, of course, managing them, I agree. It is a nightmare. I've been through several of the 1/12 budgets. So hopefully we'll get a quorum and we'll get this passed and move forward.
Thanks. 1 second. Kelly, I think Alan, did you?
No.
Okay, Kelly.
So what I think might be helpful, and I don't know if there's a way to do this, can we spent a lot of time last year collecting personal contact information for people, including email addresses. It might be interesting to put a poll out there to see how many people feel comfortable actually attending. And maybe not today, because I agree, a day of COVID is like a lifetime, right? But maybe a little closer to the meeting to put a poll out there to see if we actually can get a quorum. Because I've talked to several town meeting representatives who are very concerned with even the election, which is touchless, let alone going to town meetings. So I just think we should just try to see how many people actually feel comfortable with that forum, to see if we actually will get a quorum rather than waste people's time.
I'd encourage you to share that with the moderator and let him know that too. It's not a bad idea. I mean, for everyone that's concerned about going indoors, there's folks who would have issues going outdoors. For everyone who wants to do it digitally, there's people who have concerns about digitally. There's no easy solution to democracy. But we'll do everything we do as we have along to make sure that whatever we do, people are as safe as possible. And another thing I didn't mention, the presentations, if you will, the opening speeches that we usually do, those are all going to get recorded and sent out ahead of time. So we won't be having those. We'll probably just do a quick pledge of allegiance and that's it. It's otherwise going to be just the bare minimum. We're going to open the meeting, and within 5 minutes of opening the meeting, we'll be on the articles. We'll run through quickly. We're hoping to do some digital budget forums the week or 2 weeks ahead of time. That way people can get a chance to ask their questions, and we can get those questions out to town meeting members. As we always say, town meeting is a place for debate. When people just have legitimate questions, we'll have them hopefully get answered and asked. So there's a possibility that town meeting could just be a half an hour this year.
I think that would surprise everybody, including me. I will say, thank you. I will say it was interesting. I actually get kind of, I just had this urge that I had to take a look at some more websites, and I was surprised at the number of towns that are still using town meeting, and it was I can't remember now how many it was when I looked, but there is, I mean, an awful lot of towns and large ones, larger than us, that are utilizing town meeting instead of going to another form of government. So I was surprised. Just thought I'd share that info with you. So anyway, I did have a question for you. You did say that we will have some transfers at the end of for a special before town meeting. Okay. Do we know when that warrant has to come out? Must be.
The election will end up voting on the special warrant on their next week's meeting, and we should have the transfers within a week of that. We're going to have it fairly simple and straightforward on one little grid from this account to this account, and then here's the purpose.
Okay, so we'll need a meeting to go over that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Also, excuse me,
Yeah.
there will be a motions meeting. I assume our chair of the FinCom will be attending that meeting.
Yeah, the motions meeting is usually a week before town meeting. Sometimes it's a couple days before town meeting.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay.
Yes, I do.
Go ahead, Bob.
So going back to town meeting and reflecting on Kelly's comments. So, I did send an email to Dave Hearn, myself, to the moderator, and I got a very thoughtful and prompt response. And so I think if people have commentary or suggestions, they can send it to Dave. He'll give the consideration. Along the lines of the poll that Kelly mentioned, I mean, I suggested that Dave could even consider reaching out to even the smaller segment of the Rules Committee, a smaller group, to get inputs. I think that particular committee would be quite representative of the town meeting membership, and that's something to consider. But have your thoughts, send them to Dave. He was thoughtful and prompt in his response.
Okay. I have one other thing from Mr. Mizuko. We were notified today by our HR manager and director about a new position at the recreation department. Now that is in your budget, and that's maybe going to be one of your frost.
So there was the rec department went through two position changes. So there was an admin assistant position that changed to the title changed. We moved a vacant position from the HR department to the recreation department, we changed the title because it was an HR generalist position. So obviously we didn't need a HR generalist at the rec department. It could be, it depends on where the programming is. It depends on where the recreation world is. That's an example of where we currently have a vacant position at the rec now, not counting that one that until we can onboard people, we're not going to look at filling. So that could be one of the hiring frost positions, but the rec department's one of those weird worlds where their job, they may actually end up doing less and their job becomes a whole heck of a lot more complicated. I mean, we're tentatively running camps this summer. We may be doing it at 3 times as many sites, and their complexity level might just jump through the roof.
That was my next question, was what are you thinking of for the rec department?
We anticipate at this point that we can run camps. There will be greatly reduced capacity. So if we're looking at, there's probably going to be maybe only 30% of what we've been able to offer in terms of number of spots in the past to maintain CDC guidelines and DPH guidelines. And we believe we'll be able to have at least one of the pools open, but the state hasn't exactly released their pool guidelines yet. The complexity of what we think we're going to have to do would make opening both this summer a little challenging. So we think probably just Haas will be open, but we do got to wait for that final little bit of information to come out where we've got to look at our staffing numbers and our size and make sure that it still makes sense. But we think we'll have camps at about 30% capacity, and we'll have at least one pool open this summer.
And then we would reimburse the parents, send back checks to the parents who, because everybody has already paid for the summer, correct?
No, we haven't opened up registration yet because we're just not sure what we're going to be able to do.
I thought the registration was in February.
Spring programming.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. Yes, Alan.
Just very quick, Can I suggest that the memo that we just approved on revenue budget changes be included as a document in the budget book?
We can do that.
Mr. McQuaid, can you do that?
Where would you like it in the budget book?
You can probably follow the manager's message.
That'll work.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Anybody, anything else? We're all set? This is such a quick meeting. I can't believe it. All
So,
right.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
has the FinCom finalized its message at the beginning of the book?
Yeah, well, we thought we did. I'm going to take a look at it again to make sure that it's consistent with what were the decisions that we made today.
Okay, so just send that along, and
I will
Mr.
have it.
Mizuko owes his letter as well.
I guess the message is in, take your time, but hurry up.
I got it. No, we thought we were all set, and I just want to make sure that it, as I said, it's consistent with the message that we're, changes that we've made. Okay. Anybody want to make a motion to do?
I make a motion to, yeah.
Second.
Second,
All in favor, Alan,
aye.
Judy?
Yes,
Who's it? Wait, you guys shifted again on me. Bob,
Yes.
Kelly.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. It was
Thank you.
good meeting. Thank you.